You thought she saw you? You really believed that, didn't you? That look, that smile, that subtle touch that made your heart race. But let me tell you a truth that will hurt more than any rejection. She never saw you. She saw only what she wanted. To see what she needed to see to justify her own need for control. And Friedrich Nietzsche, that cursed philosopher that society fears so much, he knew this more than a century ago. Nietzsche wrote about this with the cruelty of a surgeon opening an infected abscess. You want to know the truth about women? Nietzsche would ask, with that characteristic mustache quivering with disdain. They are artists of dissimulation by nature. Listen closely, because what I'm about to tell you will shatter every romantic delusion you've held onto like a life raft in the ocean of your loneliness. Nietzsche didn't just observe women from afar like some armchair philosopher. No, he lived among them, suffered through them, was broken by them. His relationship with Lou Andrea Salome, that brilliant Russian psychoanalyst who would later captivate Freud himself, taught Nietzsche more about the feminine psyche than all his books combined. She rejected him, manipulated him, used his mind while denying his heart. And in that rejection, Nietzsche found his greatest insights into the nature of woman. And before you accuse me of misogyny, take a deep breath and listen. Because what Nietzsche discovered about women wasn't hatred. It was pure observation, unfiltered, without romanticism, without the comfortable lies that society forces us to swallow since childhood. Nietzsche saw through the mask, through the sacred veil of the eternal feminine, and what Nietzsche found there was both fascinating and terrifying. Nietzsche wrote that woman has always been, in her deepest essence, an actress, not out of malice, not out of dubious character, but out of evolutionary survival. Woman, Nietzsche said, learned to pretend because the world never gave her permission to be real. And you, modern man, you fall for this performance every single day. You think you know the woman by your side? You think the one who sleeps in your bed is the same one who smiles at you in the morning? Nietzsche would laugh at your naivety with that bitter laugh that only German philosophers can have. Nietzsche called this the feminine art of surface. Women, according to Nietzsche, are masters at creating layers upon layers of illusion, not because they are dishonest, but because brutal honesty was never a viable option for them. For millennia, female survival depended on the ability to read men, to anticipate their needs, to mold themselves to what was expected. And this ability, my dear, it hasn't disappeared just because we're in the 21st century, as Nietzsche predicted in his time. You think she loves you for who you are? Nietzsche would tell you that you're daydreaming. What she loves is the power you represent, the security you offer, the status you provide. And no, this doesn't make her evil. This makes her human, Nietzsche would say. But you were raised to believe in fairy tales, in soulmates, in unconditional love. Nietzsche called this the great Christian lie, the idea that love is pure, selfless, divine. Love, Nietzsche wrote in his notebooks, is the most refined form of egoism. And here's the cruelest blow that Nietzsche delivers. Women know this. They've always known. While you, poor fool, still believe there's something called true love, she's playing chess while you're playing checkers. She understands that every relationship is a power negotiation, a dance of mutual interests disguised as romance. Nietzsche observed in Human All Too Human that women are infinitely more practical than men when it comes to love. They don't get lost in idealizations. They calculate, evaluate, decide. Nietzsche even joked that if men were as practical as women in love, the human species would have disappeared long ago. But here's the twist that even Nietzsche didn't expect, although he intuited it. Modern women have learned to use the masculine language of equality to deepen their psychological dominion even further. They speak of partnership while orchestrating control. They preach independence while weaving webs of emotional dependency. Nietzsche predicted this when he wrote about resentment, about how the weak use morality as a weapon against the strong. And make no mistake, for Nietzsche, in this psychological game, women have always been the strongest. You want to hear a joke? Nietzsche would ask. Modern man believes he has liberated woman, but all he did was give her more tools for her ancient art. And that's exactly what we see today. The contemporary woman dominates not only the realm of the emotional, but has invaded the territory that man believed was his, the rational, the professional, the intellectual. And she does this without abandoning her old weapons. On the contrary, as Nietzsche predicted, she has refined them. Nietzsche wrote that truth has the structure of a woman. You never fully possess it. It always escapes, always veils itself, always promises more than it delivers. And perhaps that's why men are so fascinated by both, truth and woman. Both demand perpetual conquest. Both punish arrogance with indifference. Both reward humility with fleeting glimpses of their essence. But Nietzsche goes further. He suggests that woman is, in a certain sense, more Nietzschean than man himself. She instinctively understands that all morality is a useful fiction, that all value is a human creation, that all meaning is imposed, not discovered. While man still clings to his absolute truths, his natural laws, his codes of honor, woman floats between perspectives with the gracefulness of a ballerina. Nietzsche called this the wisdom of the chameleon, and here we arrive at the most disturbing point of Nietzsche's observations. Woman doesn't want to be understood. She wants to be misunderstood. Her strength lies precisely in mystery, in ambiguity, in the impossibility of being fully deciphered. When you think you've understood her, she's already changed. When you believe you've discovered her motivations, she's already operating on another level. Nietzsche compared this to nature itself, unpredictable, indifferent, eternally creative. In its forms of destruction and rebirth, let me tell you something that will make your blood run cold. Nietzsche discovered that women have a sixth sense for male weakness. They can smell insecurity like a shark smells blood in the water, and once they detect it, they probe it, test it, exploit it. Not out of cruelty, but out of an ancient biological imperative to find the strongest mate. Nietzsche called this the feminine instinct for hierarchy. A woman will push you, challenge you, sometimes even humiliate you, not because she hates you, but because she needs to know if you'll break. And if you do break, she'll lose all respect for you, not consciously, but at a level so primal that no amount of modern conditioning can override it. Have you ever noticed how the most beautiful women often end up with the worst men? Nietzsche had an explanation for this that would make feminists howl with rage. He argued that women are drawn to danger, to unpredictability, to men who might destroy them. Why? Because for millions of years, the dangerous man was the one who could protect her from other dangerous men. The nice guy, the safe guy, the predictable guy. He might be morally superior, but evolutionarily, he's worthless. Nietzsche saw this pattern repeating endlessly. Women choosing men who treat them poorly, while friend-zoning men who would worship them. And then society wonders why relationships are such disasters. The German philosopher went even further. Lindenhill suggested that feminism's greatest mistake would be trying to make women equal to men. Not because women are inferior, but because they are superior in their own domain. Why, Nietzsche would question, trade subtle power for brute power? Why abandon influence for authority? Why descend from the pedestal of mystery to the common ground of transparency? But Nietzsche saw something even more profound that modern men refuse to acknowledge. He recognized that women's power doesn't come from what they reveal, but from what they conceal. In Beyond Good and Evil, Nietzsche wrote that women's instinct for concealment is not a moral failing, but a survival mechanism perfected over millennia. Every gesture of revelation is calculated, every moment of vulnerability is strategic. The woman who cries in your arms, Nietzsche would tell you she's not breaking down, she's breaking you down. The tears are real, but their purpose is manipulation. And the most disturbing part? She might not even be conscious of it. This manipulation is so deeply embedded in the feminine psyche that it operates like breathing, automatic, essential, unconscious, and it's here that Nietzsche becomes truly prophetic. He predicted that the more women tried to become like men, the more they would lose their unique essence. The more they sought formal equality, the more they would sacrifice their informal superiority. And the result? A generation of frustrated women trying to play a masculine game with masculine rules, forgetting that they were always the masters of a much more sophisticated game. You see this today, don't you? Exhausted women trying to balance careers with motherhood, trying to be tough at work and soft at home, trying to compete in arenas that were never designed for their unique talents. Nietzsche would laugh, but it would be a sad laugh, because he saw the tragedy in this. By seeking to be equal to man, woman abdicates being superior in her own realm. But Nietzsche's most devastating insight was this: man created God in his image to have something to worship. Woman doesn't need to create gods because she knows she is worshipped. She is the natural object of veneration, mystery incarnate, the always delayed promise of completeness. And she uses this with the precision of a surgeon. Every gesture, every word, every silence is calculated to keep man in a perpetual state of seeking. Nietzsche noted that women rarely philosophize about love because they live it as strategy, not as concept. While man writes poems, builds theories, creates systems to understand the feminine, woman simply is. And in this being, in this apparently passive existence, lies her most active power. She doesn't need to conquer, she attracts. She doesn't need to pursue, she seduces. She doesn't need to dominate, she influences. Woman, wrote Nietzsche, is the warrior's reward, not his equal. And before you scandalize yourself with this statement, understand what Nietzsche is saying. It's not that woman is inferior, it's that she operates in a different dimension. The warrior conquers the external world. Woman reigns over the internal. The warrior dominates through force, woman through feigned weakness. The warrior is direct, woman is oblique. And here's the supreme paradox that Nietzsche identified. Woman is simultaneously the most idealistic and most realistic creature that exists. Idealistic in her expectations of man, realistic in her assessment of him. She demands that he be a hero while knowing he's merely human. She elevates him to better control him. She adores him so she can despise him when he inevitably fails to. Match the adoration. Nietzsche observed that no woman has ever been deceived about a man's character. They always know exactly who he is. The issue is that they choose to ignore this knowledge when it suits them. They allow themselves to be deceived because fiction serves their purposes better than truth. And when truth finally becomes useful, they reveal it with a precision that leaves man stunned, wondering how she always knew. The philosopher also pointed to something that modern psychology is just beginning to understand. Women don't compete with men, they compete with other women. And in this competition, man is just the trophy, the scorekeeper, the currency. Nietzsche saw this as part of the invisible war that happens in salons, in bedrooms, in kitchens. A war waged with weapons that man can't even see. Insinuations, glances, tones of voice, clothing choices. But perhaps Nietzsche's cruelest observation was this: the modern woman wants all the rights of man, but none of his responsibilities. She wants freedom without the solitude that accompanies it. She wants power without the weight it carries. She wants independence without giving up protection. And modern man, castrated by centuries of Christian civilization, as Nietzsche would say, allows this. More than allows, encourages. Nietzsche predicted that a day would come when the sexes would be so confused about their roles that both would suffer. Man trying to be sensitive would lose his strength. Woman trying to be strong would lose her magic, and in the midst of this chaos, both would desperately search for something they lost, without knowing how to name it. Nietzsche called this the twilight of the sexes, an era in which neither men nor women would know how to be what nature made them to be. But don't think Nietzsche hated women. Quite the contrary. He feared them. And fear, for Nietzsche, was the most honest form of respect. He recognized in women a primordial force that civilization tried to domesticate but never managed to eliminate. A force that operates in shadows, in whispers, in the spaces between words. A force that modern man pretends doesn't exist, because recognizing it would be admitting his own impotence before it. Every profound man, wrote Nietzsche, fears woman's superficiality, but every superficial man fears her depth, and there lies the eternal dilemma. Woman is simultaneously superficial and deep, frivolous and wise, cruel and compassionate. She contains contradictions that would destroy a man. But in her, these contradictions coexist harmoniously, like dissonant notes that somehow create a perfect melody. Nietzsche also observes something that few men want to admit. Women are naturally cruel, not with the physical cruelty of man, but with a psychological cruelty that cuts deeper than any sword. They know exactly where to attack, which insecurities to exploit, which fears to activate. And they do this with a smile on their face, sometimes even with kind words. Nietzsche called this the poison of sweet wine. And about maternal love, that feeling that society venerates as the purest and most altruistic. Nietzsche had disturbing thoughts about this, too. He saw maternal love as the most refined form of egoism. The mother loves the child because he is literally part of her. It's narcissistic love disguised as sacrifice, and through this love she molds, controls, possesses in a way that no other love allows. Nietzsche suggested that many men never really free themselves from their mothers, and women know how to use this to their advantage. Consider this. Nietzsche observed that every woman carries within her the potential for both creation and destruction. She can build a man up or tear him down with equal skill. But here's the twist. She often does both simultaneously. She'll support your dreams while subtly undermining your confidence. She'll praise your strength while highlighting your weaknesses. She'll claim to want your success while creating dependencies that ensure you never fully achieve it. Nietzsche called this the feminine paradox of nurturing destruction. It's not malicious, it's strategic. A man who is too successful might leave. A man who is too confident might wander. So she keeps you in a perpetual state of almost confident enough, almost successful enough, almost independent enough, but never quite there. Nietzsche also wrote extensively about women's relationship with truth itself. He argued that women have no inherent respect for truth the way men do. For men, truth is often an end in itself. We seek it, we value it. We'll destroy ourselves pursuing it. But for women, Nietzsche observed, truth is merely a tool. If the truth serves their purpose, they'll use it. If a lie serves better, they'll use that instead. And they'll switch between the two with a fluidity that leaves men bewildered. Woman's love of truth, Nietzsche wrote, extends exactly as far as her advantage. But here's what's truly revolutionary about Nietzsche's thinking. He didn't see this as a flaw. He saw it as evolution's greatest achievement. Women's fluid relationship with truth, their instinctive manipulation, their emotional intelligence, these aren't bugs in the system. They're features. They're what allowed the human species to survive when brute strength alone would have led to extinction. While men were fighting mammoths, women were managing complex social relationships, reading micro-expressions, building alliances, orchestrating outcomes. Nietzsche recognized that civilization itself was built not on masculine strength but on feminine subtlety. But here's Nietzsche's final touch of genius. He recognized that all this made women absolutely essential. Without them, man would be just a brute conquering the world without purpose. It's woman who gives meaning to masculine conquests. It's to impress her that he builds civilizations. It's to protect her that he goes to war. It's to possess her that he accumulates power. She is, in Nietzsche's words, the eternal feminine that elevates us, but also what imprisons us. And you, modern man, where do you fit in all this? Nietzsche has brutal advice for you. Stop trying to understand women. You never will. Instead, accept the mystery. Dance with it. Let yourself be enchanted and disenchanted, seduced and rejected, elevated and humiliated. Because it's in this eternal game, in this war of the sexes, that life finds its most intense flavor. Nietzsche concluded that the man who seeks absolute truth about women is like someone trying to trap the wind in a bottle. You can study them, analyze them, theorize them, but the moment you think you've understood them, they've already transformed into something else. And perhaps, suggests Nietzsche, that's exactly how it should be. Because a world in which women were fully understandable would be a world without magic, without mystery, without that delicious tension that makes life worth living. Woman was God's second mistake, Nietzsche once joked. The first, of course, was man, but it was a necessary mistake, a productive mistake, a mistake that created all the comedy and tragedy of human existence. And in the end, Nietzsche suggests, we should be grateful for this mistake, because without it, we would be perfect and bored gods instead of imperfect and fascinated humans. So the next time you feel confused, manipulated, or lost in a woman's psychological labyrinth, remember Nietzsche. Remember that you're not alone in this confusion, that men for thousands of years have felt the same, and that perhaps, just perhaps, confusion is the point, because it's in it that we find our deepest humanity, our most honest vulnerability, our rawest need for connection, even knowing that this connection is, ultimately, impossible. Nietzsche died insane, embracing a horse in the streets of Turin. Some say it was syphilis, others that it was the weight of his own ideas. But I prefer to think it was the accumulation of all this truth about women, all this understanding of the impossibility of understanding them, that finally broke his brilliant mind. Because there are truths, as Nietzsche himself said, that are too heavy for human sanity to carry. And you who have come this far, you who have heard these hard and disturbing words, what will you do with them? Will you reject them as misogyny? Will you embrace them as revelation? Or will you do what Nietzsche would do, dance with ambiguity, laugh at contradiction, and continue pursuing the eternal feminine, knowing you'll never reach it, but that the pursuit itself is what gives color and warmth to this cold and indifferent existence? The choice, my dear viewer, is yours. But remember, ignoring Nietzsche won't make his observations less true. It will only make you less prepared for the game that's being played, whether you know it or not. And in this game, as Nietzsche reminded us with his brutal honesty, women will always play better than you. The question is, will you at least learn the rules, or will you continue being the unconscious pawn on their chessboard? And before you leave, before you return to your comfortable life where these truths can be ignored, let me plant one last seed of Nietzsche in your mind. A man's maturity means having found again the seriousness one had as a child at play. Perhaps the secret isn't to take the game of the sexes less seriously, but more. Perhaps it's to fully embrace the absurd, the impossibility, the terrible beauty of never being able to truly possess what we most desire. Perhaps, as Nietzsche suggested, the dance is more important than the destination. Now, go. Return to the world where these truths are veiled by polite smiles and social lies. But carry with you what Nietzsche revealed. Use this knowledge not as a weapon, but as a shield, not to hurt, but to not be hurt, not to conquer, but to play the game with open eyes. Because in the end, as Nietzsche knew very well, there's no Exit from this game. There are only more or less conscious ways of playing it. But wait, before you go, let me share with you Nietzsche's ultimate secret, the one he whispered only in his private notebooks, the one that his sister Elizabeth tried to suppress after his death. Nietzsche believed that the highest form of human evolution would be the creation of what he called the Übermensch, the Overman. But here's what most people don't understand. Nietzsche hinted that this Overman might not be male at all. He suggested that once women fully embraced their power, once they stopped trying to imitate men and instead perfected their own unique strengths, they would become something that would make current humanity look like apes. Think about it. Women already possess the power to create life. They already control the emotional landscape of civilization. They already manipulate reality through perception. What happens when they add intellectual and physical power to this arsenal? What happens when they stop pretending to be the weaker sex and reveal themselves as the architects of human destiny they have always been? Nietzsche saw this coming. He saw a future where women would drop their masks not to become like men, but to become something beyond both men and women as we currently understand them. And this terrified him, because Nietzsche realized that men's entire identity, our entire purpose, has been built around the illusion that we are necessary, that we are the protectors, the providers, the leaders. But what happens when women no longer need protection? When they can provide for themselves? When they lead not through masculine imitation, but through feminine innovation? The entire structure of civilization built on masculine vanity and feminine manipulation would collapse, and from its ashes would rise something Nietzsche could only glimpse in his most feverish visions. He wrote, in a passage his sister tried to burn, "The future belongs to woman, not because she will become man's equal, but because she will finally become herself. And when that happens, man will face his greatest crisis, the crisis of relevance." Nietzsche predicted that this transformation would drive men to one of two extremes. Either they would evolve to match this new feminine power, or they would retreat into increasingly violent expressions of their obsolete masculinity. We're seeing both happening right now, aren't we? The rise of both extreme feminism and violent masculinity movements. They're not opposites, Nietzsche would say. They're symptoms of the same phenomenon, the death throes of the old order. Women are beginning to shed their performative weakness, and men are panicking. Some men are trying to evolve, to find new ways to be valuable in a world where physical strength and financial provision are no longer enough. Others are retreating into fantasy worlds where they can still be heroes, still be necessary, still be men in the traditional sense. But Nietzsche's most chilling prediction was this. He believed that the conflict between evolving feminine power and obsolete masculine identity would lead to a kind of psychological warfare unlike anything humanity had seen, not a war fought with weapons, but with minds. Women would use their superior emotional intelligence and social manipulation skills to reshape reality itself. Men would either adapt or be discarded. The casualties wouldn't be counted in bodies, but in broken spirits, shattered identities, and lost souls. And you, sitting there reading this, you're living in the middle of this war, whether you know it or not. Every interaction with a woman is a skirmish. Every relationship is a campaign. Every marriage is a peace treaty that both sides know is temporary. Nietzsche saw all of this coming. He tried to warn us, but we didn't listen. We couldn't. Listen, because the truth was too terrible to accept. So here you are, armed with Nietzsche's insights, standing at the crossroads of history. You can choose to remain ignorant, to pretend that the old rules still apply, that the old games still work, or you can embrace the terrible knowledge that Nietzsche offers. You can see women not as the enemy, but as the evolutionary force that will either destroy you or transform you. You can stop playing by rules that no longer apply and start writing new ones. But remember this, and remember it well. Nietzsche went mad staring into these truths. He saw too much, understood too deeply, and it broke him. The question is, are you strong enough to carry this knowledge without losing yourself? Are you evolved enough to dance with the feminine future without being consumed by it? Or will you, like so many men before you, retreat into comfortable delusions while the world changes around you? The choice is yours. But know that once you see what Nietzsche saw, you can never unsee it. Once you understand the game being played, you can never again pretend to be an innocent bystander. You become a player, whether you want to or not. And in this game, as Nietzsche knew all too well, the stakes are nothing less than the future of human consciousness itself. And if this disturbed you, if this shook your certainties, if this made you question everything you thought you knew about women, then Nietzsche fulfilled his purpose, because he didn't come to bring peace, but a sword. He didn't come to comfort, but to awaken. He didn't come to lie, but to reveal truths that most would prefer to leave buried. And now these truths live in you. What you'll do with them? Well, that's between you and the abyss that Nietzsche spent his life contemplating. One final thought, one last seed of Nietzschean wisdom to plant in your mind before you return to your everyday existence. Nietzsche believed that the greatest tragedy of modern man is not that he is unloved, but that he is unlovable, not because of his flaws, but because of his refusal to become what he could be. Women, in their cruelty and their kindness, their manipulation and their inspiration, are evolution's way of forcing men to transcend themselves. Every rejection is an invitation to grow. Every heartbreak is a call to transform. Every manipulation is a test of your potential to become something more than you are. So the next time a woman confuses you, manipulates you, rejects you, or drives you to the edge of madness, remember Nietzsche's words, "That which does not kill you makes you stronger." But he might have added, "That which does not kill you might be trying to evolve you." And in the end, that's what women are. Not your completion, not your salvation, not your destruction, but your evolution. The question is, will you evolve, or will you become extinct? The answer to that question will determine not just your personal fate, but the fate of masculinity itself in the coming century. Choose wisely. Choose consciously. Choose with the full knowledge of what's at stake. Because as Nietzsche knew and as you now know, ignorance is no longer an option. The game is being played whether you participate or not. The only choice is whether you play to win or play to survive. And in this game, as in evolution itself, those who merely try to survive are already on their way to extinction.